Hey, what's up, brother? How are you doing today? I'd like to just start this video by inviting you to just take a pause from the distractions of the World Wide Web and social media and work and family and relationship. Just take a moment and check in with yourself real quick and ask yourself, how am I really, truly doing today in this moment? Are you struggling with a relationship that you're in where you're just extremely unhappy? Do you find yourself numbing out with alcohol, weed, or porn because you're trying so desperately not to feel this one painful area of your life? Do you feel like you're lacking meaning and purpose in your life? If any of those things or many others ring true for you in this moment, I'd like to ask you, what if I told you that the very things that you are avoiding and numbing out from are the actual cause of your current state of suffering? Not only are they the actual cause of your suffering and hardship, but they are also the keys to unlocking your potential, purpose, and providing deep meaning in your life. This has been true for me and for every other man that I've been working with. We grow up as young boys learning to suppress and reject certain parts of ourselves and to suppress our emotions intensely. It becomes a survival mechanism. And it's not something we're usually aware of by the time we enter adulthood because we've been doing it for so long. Do you have coping mechanisms that you use to cope with difficult situations? How do you cope when your relationship partner triggers you? Do you avoid? Do you just hop in the truck and squeal your tires out the driveway? Or are you a guy who can be assertive and confident in his presence enough to be able to have difficult conversations and meet conflict head on? That's essentially what I'm going to be talking about here today. And I'm just going to get vulnerable and honest and transparent with you guys because this is I feel an urge for my authenticity to come out on this channel that I've created. It's called A Changed Man. And in order for me to do that, I got to get rid of all the scripts and trying to hook you as an audience to add another subscriber. Like, fuck all that for a minute. Let me just get real with you guys, because my intention for starting this channel was to encourage men to step into a journey of healing their pain, finding their purpose, building self-confidence, healing trauma, and just reconnecting with themselves in a way that brings about joy and fulfillment in their life. And I'm finding it really hard for me to do that if I'm trying to do YouTube just like everybody else. And so I'm going to drink some coffee while I talk to you guys from my mug. It says grateful. Some days I'm not grateful, but today I feel pretty grateful that I'm taking this leap into letting my authenticity shine. For the first 30 plus years of my life, I spent most of my life avoiding pain. And I think we're wired that way as men and as human beings. I believe we're hardwired in a way to where we avoid discomfort and chase pleasure at all cost. But there comes a time in a man's life, especially in midlife, and I'm going to go into that here in just a moment, but especially in midlife, where we're stopped dead in our tracks and we look back on the path that we've traveled, and there's this aching sense of feeling unfulfilled, followed by a fear like, is it too fucking late? And we can find ourselves in a relationship that just is not fulfilling in any capacity. It lacks emotional depth. We can find ourselves realizing the pain that we followed society's rules to the point where I did not follow our own dream. We find ourselves stuck in a 9 to 5, disconnected from our family, disconnected from ourselves and our purpose. And I'm not saying that, a person's 9 to 5 job or career can't be their purpose. What I am saying is that myself and many of my friends and many of the men that I've coached have reached this area of life where they've started asking themselves these existential questions. And the reason I'm doing this video, guys, is especially for the young men who are watching, is to encourage you to take the leap into confronting your pain. Not waiting till life brings you to your literal fucking knees in midlife in some form of an intense crisis, because not many men make it out of that. And that's hard for me to talk about. I still have some unprocessed and unfelt grief surrounding this very topic. A little over 4 years ago, I literally tried to intentionally overdose and commit suicide. I was at that midlife crisis, that turning point where I had spent my whole life avoiding the pain of childhood, the trauma, avoiding the grief of all the heartbreaks that I had in toxic relationships, avoiding the fact that I didn't fulfilled in my life, avoiding the awareness that I had that I was just following society's rules and not operating outside of the boundaries that our cultural society puts on us. I wasn't looking at any of that, and since I spent the first half of my life avoiding it, I was not prepared when the time came, when midlife to be exact, happened. And that's at no fault of my own. I needed to survive. This was the path that my soul chose to have in this life. But you feel extremely fucking powerless if you come to midlife and you don't have any tools to navigate what's about to happen. And what happened for me, and what I've been finding as a pattern, and let me just say this real quick because it's worth knowing. Over the last 4 years, I have had eight extremely close male friends that I grew up with, that I went to high school with, that have committed suicide, ranging from age 38 to 52. And I look back at how we even became friends, and there was a common theme in our lives. Many of us used humor as a form to escape. We were all the class clowns. We got into mayhem in ways, like all the shit, to try and mitigate the pain and suffering that we were dealing with or not dealing with internally. We all had that in common. Most all of us grew up in a home with a disconnected or completely absent father, which leaves a hole in your heart the size of fucking Texas. And the pattern that I've been recognizing, and I've tried to do some research on this and I can't find anything on it. However, this has been my experience, is when we get to midlife, it's like our subconscious mind is full of all this shit that hasn't been dealt with. And our body is full of all of this emotional energy that has yet to be processed and let go of. And it just starts leaking out into our awareness. And it's like we can't shut it off. And it's like, dude, what about your dad's suicide? Dude, what about growing up with an alcoholic, abusive mother who was manipulative and who made every piece of suffering that you experienced in childhood at that time your fault? What about the ways you are taken advantage of in relationships? All of this shit starts to seep to the surface of our awareness, and it's like, what do I do with it? I'm not equipped. I know how to shoot heroin. I know how to drink a beer and avoid what have been going through most of my life, or avoiding all the pain. But I don't know how to confront all of this pain, hurt, and trauma that's coming to the surface. And what's really crazy, you guys, is one of my really good friends whose funeral I went to just this last year. Everybody at the funeral, even his close family members, were like, we don't understand how this could have happened. And I was talking to some of them, and they're like, you and him were the funniest guys we'd ever met. You were the life of the party. You brought so much life to everyone else's life, and so much joy and excitement and fun. And I just looked at her and I said, we have what I would call today is Robin Williams syndrome. And she was taken back by that statement. What do you mean? I said, both him and I dealt with so much childhood trauma and pain and hurt that was masked and covered up by humor and being the funny guy, being the life of the party. This is the jester archetype in its shadow expression. And they didn't even know how much pain he was actually dealing with. And some of the common responses I've heard at these funerals is like, well, you never know what somebody's going through. Like, why is that? Why is that we've become so damn disconnected that none of us know what each other's going through? And I'm going to provide you a solution later in the video to that exact problem. So if you're a young man watching this, or even if you're in your 30s or 40s and you have yet to go on this journey of confronting your pain, I truly believe in my heart 1,000% that the biggest mistake we can make as a man is not confronting our pain. Now, it doesn't have to be, pain isn't just this like huge traumatic event. Pain is the subtle things in life, like feeling insecure in a relationship. It's like pain can show up as feeling shame around sex with your partner. Like you've been repressing this sexual desire you to have to try and experience something with your partner, but you're so fucking afraid to like even talk to her about that need of yours out of fear that she's going to reject you. Because let's face it, like society has absolutely demonized men's sexual energy. And I can recall like, you know, having boners in middle school and like being so fucking ashamed of it and like afraid for it. Nobody can see this and I have to hide this. It's like we learn at an early age that we have to hide our own sexuality and our own biology. Not to mention the fact that we hear time and time again, like all of these stories about, you know, men being rapists, men being narcissistic, toxic aggressors, like whatever. Pain can also show up in the form of inadequacy. Is there an area of your life where you feel really inadequate in? We have to be confronting these things. Confronting doesn't mean like negative confrontation. It can simply just be coming face to face with like asking questions. Why do I feel insecure right now? What is that? What's underneath of that? What's driving that insecurity? And going down that rabbit hole and following it wherever it takes you. And feeling the feelings that arise within you as a result of coming face to face with that insecurity. Areas where we feel incapable in life are simply just a signal that we maybe need to develop and harness a new skill. Self-mastery is absolutely at the core of my values. And so if I feel like I'm lacking in self-confidence, I tend to just go inward with that and look at it. Like, where do I not feel confident? And why do I not feel confident? But to give you a real life example, I'm going to use this YouTube channel, A Changed Man, because truthfully, I've had to work through so much internal shit. Like this abusive, narcissistic, and toxic inner critic that I have at times has gotten like out of fucking control trying to start this channel. But the main theme of what's been preventing me from actually even doing a video like this has been imposter syndrome. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit later too about transforming pain into purpose. And I guess I could tie that into this example as well. So imposter syndrome. That feeling kind of feels like I'm not who I say I am. It can feel powerless. It could feel just like shit, to feel like you're an imposter in some way. And my typical response before would just be, okay, well, I'm going to put that on a shelf somewhere and compartmentalize it, and just ignore it. The problem with that, and the whole thesis of this video, is whatever we suppress, reject, deny, or exile only gets stronger. And I think Joe Dispenza says it in a way that's like, what we resist persists, and that's absolutely true. What we reject and resist goes into what we call our shadow bag. And you've probably heard it if you've been in the men's personal development space about shadow work, and that's something that I practice on a regular basis. And this video is kind of in line with that, of confronting your pain, confronting your shadow, all the things that you've tried to outrun, outdrink, outfuck, all of it is finally coming face to face with those things. Imposter syndrome, what I've realized by actually meeting the feelings of imposter syndrome and imposter syndrome itself head on, is that it had nothing to do with me not having the wisdom and the tools to be able to talk about these things, because I have gone through it and I have transcended a lot of pain. It had to do with a belief that I was still carrying, that I wasn't good enough. And what I've realized is that imposter syndrome is just a mechanism that the ego utilizes to keep us in alignment with what we believe. And so if we have a limiting belief about ourselves of not being good enough, anytime we try and act outside of that belief, imposter syndrome will come up and rear its head and bring us back into alignment with the belief that we are not good enough. And hell, we're here, I'm having coffee, why don't we just go into not being good enough and how that's learned? There were many childhood experiences that I had where it was my dad being hypercritical of me, pushing me hard, which can be a great thing, and I think it was, now that I see it differently. But I felt like I couldn't make a mistake around him without him getting angry and volatile. And then my relationship with my mom. There were so many times that she would be drunk and on one of her rage binges where she would just say some fucking hurtful shit to me. Like, you're such a fuck up. Like, the reason I drink is because of you. And I'm like this innocent fucking 11-year-old, right? But you hear that enough as a boy, and not to mention that we don't even have the cognitive capacity. Our brain's not developed enough to actually see what's going on, that mom's projecting her own suffering onto me, or that dad's just projecting his own insecurities and anger onto me. We can't see that. And so we give meaning to these situations in childhood. And the meaning that I gave to every time this happened was the meaning that I was in some capacity not good enough for them. Because if I was, wouldn't they just love me unconditionally? And so we can build a belief simply by giving the same meaning to an experience over and over and over again. And if we do that enough times, we develop a belief. In my experience, it was the belief of not being good enough. And so today I have to challenge that. I have to meet that belief head on. And I wouldn't even know that that's what was under the surface if I wasn't willing to confront the pain of imposter syndrome and going down that rabbit hole and finding what's really underneath that's driving all of this. And me doing this video is just a way that I'm being able to challenge this belief of me not being good enough. Sure, to be honest, I have fear of rejection or not being accepted or all of those different things that come up. It's not how I live my life every day, but it does still come up. But I have tools, strategies, and systems in place to be able to meet that stuff head on. So what are some other ways that we can confront our pain? What pain do you have? And this is a really hard question for a lot of the men that I've worked with too, because they don't know. They've been suppressing, numbing, and avoiding their pain for so long that they're honestly and legitimately clueless. They haven't had somebody show up in their life that could push them into that territory of confronting their pain, or working with somebody like a men's coach or a therapist, or even just getting involved in a men's group where other men can start pointing out your blind spots. Other men who can actually lead you down this rabbit hole of personal development to where you gain the actual awareness you need to confront your pain. There was many times I was telling the truth when somebody asked me, "How are you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing great." Because that's honestly how I felt in those moments, but like I was so blind to what was happening beneath the surface inside of me. So some different areas, different ways that I've been able to find, getting way ahead of myself here, guys. I'm super passionate about this stuff, and that's like become my life's work. Some other ways that I use to confront my pain is looking at avoidance patterns. Like, what areas of my life am I avoiding? Financially, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, relationship-wise, all of it. And then I can reverse engineer that avoidance pattern. Am I using the gym as a way to not face some part of my reality? If so, dive into that. What are you actually avoiding? Then we can also look at coping mechanisms. What coping mechanisms have you built for yourself? And what are they being used to avoid? The other area that I do a lot of work on in being able to confront my own pain, and I think this is probably the most practical, especially if you're just beginning the journey of personal development and self-improvement, is looking at the areas of life where you're reactive. And there's no better place to look than within the relationship dynamic, or even as a father, because what I have found is your partner will trigger you more than anybody else. Your children will trigger you more than anybody else. And in those moments of being triggered, I know some people don't like that word, but whatever. It is what it is. Let's call it reactivity or being extremely activated. Like there's this emotional intensity where like our default response is going to be rage or anger or just fleeing the scene. Can you develop a habit of just pausing in those moments? When your wife says that thing, or when your kids do that thing, of just taking a step back and even just saying to yourself internally, stop, pause, and just taking a time out and be like, what is actually being triggered within me? Because more often than not, it's an unhealed wound of some sort that's being triggered. And the trigger serves an intense purpose in your life. It's like an alarm that's saying, hey, look at this. And as a dad, this happens often. I can say the moments I get really triggered are the moments where I'm avoiding my needs. Like if I've been avoiding myself for too long and disconnected from my own needs of like just needing to get out and play and experience joy and solitude on my own, that's when I start to become extremely reactive in my family dynamic. But I wouldn't know that if I didn't take a pause and time to self-reflect and check in with myself and ask myself some powerful questions like, what is actually coming up for me in this moment? And then it's like, oh, you're not doing this for yourself. Okay, well, fuck, let's make a commitment and take action now to do something for myself. And that's going to be the theme of this. Is it's not just about confronting your pain and getting intimate with your own shadow and all the parts of yourself that you've repressed and suppressed for so long, but actually taking action and integrating. Because without it, we stay stuck in the same patterns. Sure, it's nice to have the awareness like, oh, this is an insecurity in the relationship because I've never felt good enough for my family. Okay, fine. What do we do with that? We take action. And it just needs to be small, single-step actions in the beginning. I'll share with you another thing on relationships that I realized that I was experiencing. Anytime a woman would get too close to me, like emotionally, intimately, if I felt like things were getting serious, I used to just avoid it. In fact, I would just bounce. Quite often, I would just like sabotage, blow up the whole relationship in some, let's say, not so pleasing fashion, and I would end it. Why is that? Why would I do that? If I wasn't willing to confront my pain and myself, I would not know what was actually happening. The truth is, I used to sabotage relationships anytime it got too emotionally close or intimate, was because I had a mother who was very enmeshed with me, and I was enmeshed with her emotionally. And what that means is like her happiness was contingent upon me. She smothered me. She limited me from having experience because without me, she didn't know who the fuck she was, and she didn't feel happy. And that smothering of me like restricted me as a child. It made it so that I didn't feel confident enough to be able to like leave her and go have life experiences. And so I stayed within this bubble because that's just what happened. And so what was actually being triggered in relationships when things were getting really close, I was starting to feel smothered, just like it was my mother smothering me again. And like somehow this relationship, if I continued this relationship, I'm going to lose my freedom as a man. And let's be honest, that is a core need of every man, which is freedom, autonomy. So, we're talking about confronting pain, not making the number one mistake that I feel most men make, which is not confronting their pain. I've lost 8 friends to suicide as a result of them not confronting their pain. Sure, there was probably other mental health challenges going on at the time, but when you hear that the people closest to them did not have any idea what they were going through, it just shows you how deeply conditioned we are as men to suppress how we feel. It is my goal and my intention with this channel and in the communities that I'm building to create a safe space for men to open up and be vulnerable. It's not that we don't have the capacity to be vulnerable, but you probably hear that in society and our culture all over the place right now. Men just need to be more vulnerable. That's the solution. No, it's not. I can honestly tell you that even in my current relationship, she doesn't quite know how to handle my vulnerability. Or my average everyday friends, like the surface level friendships, they don't talk about that kind of shit. It's not that we don't have the capacity to feel or be vulnerable. I would argue that men feel immensely, especially if they've gone through a lot of heartache and childhood trauma. They're probably extremely sensitive. And that's okay. So what do we do about that? And how do we transform this pain into purpose? Before I get into what we can actually do about this, where are we going to find those relationships with other people where we can be vulnerable? This channel and the work that I do as a professional men's coach and fatherhood group facilitator and all of these things That's my purpose. That's my calling in this life. Who would have thought that me becoming a heroin addict and intentionally trying to commit suicide and take my own life would lead me to a path of healing and a transformative journey of finding my purpose? I had to go into all of that childhood trauma. My father's suicide when I was age 8, healing the wounds that I had around my emotionally abusive and alcoholic mother, all of it to lead me here today. I have an intense passion and purpose today to help men go on this journey of healing and confronting their pain and integrating their shadow and finding their purpose and finding their potential. I would not have gotten there if I didn't, if life wouldn't have blessed me that day with no other option than to confront my pain. And so how do we get into a community where we can actually feel safe in being vulnerable? The first step that I highly recommend to even the guys that I coach is to join a men's group. And I will be putting one together here shortly. If you have any interest, please reach out in the comments and let me know. I've been a part of a men's group, and I'm actually part of a couple different ones. One that's specifically fatherhood, and then one that has to do with basically men's trauma and pain. These are spaces where I can show up authentically, meaning I can show up with my pain, and not only is it welcome and encouraged, it's held safely. These aren't environments where men are like, oh, fuck, just, quit being a pussy or quit being a bitch, or let's just go have a beer and deal with it. It's men who care enough and who have walked the same journey, or even that are stages, further along than I am, that are willing and lovingly challenge me and challenge each other, and not in a confrontational type of way, but to call each other forward, to confront the pain, to guide us through, to support us through that pain, so that we can come out the other side with a purpose and feeling loved and accepted. I can't express the immense value in words that I've received from doing this inner work with other men. It is truly remarkable to know that there are other guys out there that I can trust enough to unload my deepest vulnerabilities. The shit that I've been so scared to let anyone else see. And that is like the most beautiful first step, you guys, is just being able to finally share it. It develops confidence in our ability to navigate painful life situations. The other one is to hire a men's coach. A men's coach that specializes in whatever you're going through. But like a men's coach that specializes in trauma, addiction, emotional healing, all of it. And of course, there's therapy. I got my start in therapy. I worked with a certified trauma specialist, to be exact. And that's where I started my healing journey. The day after my intentional overdose, I went into a recovery setting and started working with a trauma specialist. From there, I've hired a men's coach to do shadow work with me. I've hired a hypnotherapist to do hypnotherapy with me. And I've gotten involved in many men's groups so that I can freaking integrate everything that I've been learning and healing. Anyways, I hope this video has been of some value to you, and I would just love to start a community here in the comments. Next month, I'll be launching a online community for men who want to join, receive some coaching, guidance, and facilitation from me, and just to connect with each other on a deep level. If you have any interest in that, please let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask me that I can maybe do another video on to support you, I would absolutely welcome that and love to do that for you.